All right. So, thanks, Michelle, and I'll let you guys reintroduce yourselves on the call there.
Well, I'll introduce Jim, but I'm Michelle Damone, and I'm a political consultant from West Palm Beach, Florida, and I've been working with the Indivisible group in Georgia 11 for the last few months, and I'm looking forward to all of the implementation and the ideas that we've all been speaking about. So, and I will be seeing you guys in Georgia at the end of the month. I'll be there April 26th. So I look forward to having a cup of coffee or breakfast, whatever, with anybody in the group. But for today's purpose, I wanted to introduce my friend, and I work for him, Jim Bonfiglio. He's a Democrat down here in Palm Beach County, Florida, and he ran for the District House seat 89 for the state of Florida, which is a Republican district, and it goes from Boca Raton north to Singer Island and captures mostly the coastline. And some people thought Jim would not win, but he came close. He came within 32 votes, and we had a recount, and I'm going to let Jim tell you the story. But Jim is also an attorney and very involved in our community, and he's just a really good person, and he'd be a blessing in the Democratic Party for his leadership skills. So, Jim Bonfiglio.
Hi, thank you. Yes, my name is Jim Bonfiglio. I am a resident of Ocean Ridge. I've lived in Ocean Ridge for 30 years, resident of Palm Beach County for 40 years, practiced law here, mostly mortgage foreclosure defense work for the past 30 years. I'm a four-term Planning and Zoning Commissioner in Ocean Ridge. Half that time I spent as the vice chair, the other half I spent as the chairman. Then I ran for town commission. I'm a two-term town commissioner. 1 year I acted as vice mayor, and another year I sat as the mayor of Ocean Ridge. I had to resign that seat to run for State House District 89, and so I am now former commissioner and mayor of Ocean Ridge. I ran for State House District 89, and it's a Republican district. It's about 43,000 registered Republicans, 40,000 registered Democrats, and about 39,000 registered NPAs, around 120 some odd thousand total registered voters. It's an intercoastal district, oceanfront district, and as Michelle said, they anticipated I would come within 3,000 or 4,000 votes in that district. No Dem has ever come within that range in that seat since its existence, and I surprised everybody and came within 32 votes of winning.
And Robert, I want to go back on something that Jim just said that is important as we apply it to Georgia 11 as we move to the 2020 election. The way that he was able to break down those registered Dems and the registered Republicans and the NPAs becomes extremely important in strategy. And that is why you've heard me speak to your group a lot about the analytical data and how important it is applying it to strategy and you know, where you fundraise and spend your money. So,
yeah, if you want to know a little bit about that process, I did have a primary, and so during the primary period, we targeted as demographics what we call hot Dems, which are Dems that have voted, I think, at least 3 straight elections in a row for our mailings, because those were the ones that we thought would be active to go out and vote in the primary. And then, you know, when we got into the general, after I won the primary about close to 60%, over 40%. So obviously, you know, pretty overwhelming favorite of all the Democrats in the district. So we decided, since I would probably capture most, if not all, the Democratic votes, to concentrate our outreach to the NPAs. So again, we targeted NPAs who were hot and medium NPAs, ones that I guess they have an analytical system to figure out, you know, if they're likely to vote Democratic, and those were our targets for our mailing and our knocking on doors.
And for those who don't know what NPAs are, it's nonpartisan. So.
Yeah, no party affiliation. So that's kind of how we targeted it. And we anticipated that the Republicans would vastly outspend us, and we were right. At the end of the day, we spent about $600,000 in our race. The Republicans spent 1.3, 1.4, somewhere around there on their end. So
Million,
yeah. We had anticipated that, and we felt that the only way we were realistically going to overcome that kind of spending deficit was to knock on doors, and we had to target the correct doors. And then towards the end of the race, we did some targeted TV advertising, and that was our strategy to win. And total number of votes cast in the race was around 83,000 in the district. There were about 3,000 overvotes and undervotes, which means that people voted higher up the ballot for U.S. Senator or Governor, but didn't drop down to my race and vote. We had a total of about 80,000 ballots that were cast and counted, and it was 39,000 and change for the winner. I had 39,000 and change, essentially a tied race for all intents and purposes in a non-presidential year, which we thought was, we accomplished. We did a lot of things right, in other words, getting that close to winning the race when we were anticipated of losing by 3,000 or 4,000 votes.
Yeah, so thanks for the background there, and thanks for joining. We just had some storms move here through the metro area. They may be on their way down to South Florida too, but I think everybody's pretty much okay. But there has been a little bit of damage in the area.
Well, that's unusual. Usually, Florida sends you our hurricanes.
Oh, and actually, that could be a whole topic we could go into, but we'll save that one for another day. But specifically, going back to, and I'm not sure if you spoke about this, you said you were at an event yesterday, but we were talking about voting issues, and that is something that has been still in the press and the news here in Georgia because of Kemp's election, or Kemp running his own election. Could you talk a little bit more? You said earlier losing by 32 votes there?
Sure. Well, the thing is, and I think this is nationwide, Democrats win when people vote, and Republicans win when people don't vote. So it's always, I think, been the Republican strategy to suppress votes, and they have a number of different ways that they suppress the votes. Some of the things that are ingrained in the statutes to prevent Democrats in general from voting are, some of the restrictive measures by which they allow absentee ballots or vote by mail ballots. One of the big things that happened here in Florida, especially in my race, is that they have a system for the voter to sign the ballot, and then the canvassing board compares the signature to the signature on record, and they have the right, the canvassing board has the right after a vote to disregard the ballot if they don't think the signature matches. In Florida, though, there are no criteria for comparing signatures, either in the statute or in the administrative code that implements the statute, and the canvassing board doesn't have any mechanism to train the board on signature analysis. And I don't know about you, but if my signature, if they actually compared signatures on my checks, I'd never be able to cash a check, or nobody would ever get paid because my signature changes all the time. That's one of the big things that they use to suppress Democratic votes, is by this signature match. One of the things that happened in my race when everybody was so close, the governor was within a half a point. The U.S. Senate was within 0.25%. My race was 32 votes. So we had to recount all these ballots and go through a process of challenging ballots and challenging the canvassing board's decision on whether to accept or reject the ballots. One of the things that Senator Nelson in his race did was he's brought a lawsuit to allow them to go out and get more time to we call cure the signature issue, and they could track down people who signed absentee or vote by mail ballots and sign an affidavit that said, yeah, that's my vote. I voted in the election. That's my signature. So that was done through Senator Nelson's lawsuit. My lawsuit was, trying to make this long story short, the order in which races were to be recounted. If the way the system worked here in Palm Beach County, they had almost 1 million ballots cast. The machines here are old and could only count a race one time. In other words, for each race, they would have to run the ballots through the machines one time. They couldn't count multiple races one time. So that meant they'd have to run 3 races through the ballot machine, counting machines, which is all they are, is just high-speed scanners.
Mm-hmm.
That's what so if you work in an office, if you got a scanner, they always break down every 50, 100 copies. Well, we had, a total of 3 million statewide ballots that had to be counted, plus my race had 83,000 ballots, and they could never have completed the recount in time to certify the results to the Secretary of State, which meant that if they didn't get to me by the time of certification, they had to certify by law. They had to certify the initial results, which meant I automatically would have lost. So what I had to do is I had to sue the Secretary of State to require the canvassing board to count my race because it was so close. It was, for all intents and purposes, the only race where a recount, both machine and manual recount, could actually flip the count from me losing to me winning. And we eventually won that lawsuit. So as soon as they finished counting the Nelson Scott U.S. Senate race, they immediately went to my race, which they actually finished that about an hour or so before, maybe even a little bit less, before the certification deadline. I went in down 37 votes, and I wound up picking up 5 votes.
So, Robert, if you heard something that Jim just said, he was speaking about a machine recount, and then he was speaking about a manual recount, which means when there's a paper trail that you can manually recount those votes if you don't believe in that machine recount, which is an issue that Georgia is facing right now because the governor, Governor Kemp, they're waiting for him, or I think he's actually signed it already, a bill where they're going to spend $150 million to purchase new equipment throughout the entire state of Georgia and every single county that is paperless, and it's a barcode system. So that system that you and I depended on for 12 days in that recount that was grueling in Palm Beach County, we know without a doubt that Jim lost by 32 votes because we had the opportunity. We call it in Florida, in the public, in the sunshine. We had the opportunity in public, in the sunshine, with a canvassing board, with Republicans, Democrats, and representation for both sides to view all those ballots for a manual recount, which leads to voter confidence when you have that ability to do something like that.
See, without a paper trail, well, let me flip it the other way. With a paper trail, we had 2 opportunities to cure or collect more votes than were actually captured the first time around in the count. Number one, we could capture the votes by curing signatures, and the other way was by doing the manual recount and actually looking at the vote and determining, in my race there were 3,000 undervotes, and determining whether or not that was actually an undervote or whether the voter did actually vote and the machine did not pick up the fact that voter voted. So there were 2 opportunities to pick up votes that were not actually picked up by the machine. If you don't have that paper trail, you miss those opportunities to capture votes. And the bottom line is, it's not meant really, capturing votes for a politician. It is making sure that every legally cast ballot is counted. And that's the bottom line of the democratic system, is making sure everybody who has cast a vote has their vote counted.
As we said this commonly for 12 days, every legal vote counts.
Right. Yeah, I just came out from a business trip in Alberta for 2 weeks, and they are in the middle of electing their premier, as they call it. It's kind of like the governor of the province, and they allow voting in malls and airports in Alberta. Which I think I've shared this maybe with you, Michelle, and a few others. I think that would potentially make some Republicans' heads spin.
Well, yeah, Republicans don't like it when more people vote. They don't like it because, from their point of view, the wrong people vote, which is Democrats. So they don't like it when people vote. And that's why we have to continuously fight this battle to make sure there are more voting locations open and available. They are accessible to handicapped, that the ballots are interpreted in the various languages that the residents speak. Here in Florida, we have obviously a very large Hispanic community, so they have to be translatable into Spanish. We have a large Haitian community. Many of the Haitians speak Creole. So you have to make sure that the people who are eligible to vote can read the ballot so they understand who or what they are voting for.
Yeah.
And again, they don't like that. You hear from the right a lot, you're in America, speak English, Well, if you were an American and you spoke the native language, you'd be speaking, Iroquois or Algonquin. Yep. Those are the original Americans here in the United States, and not English, because the English were the invaders.
Yeah, but I mean, you start arguing those points, and the phone usually just goes quiet with some of these Republicans, unfortunately. So.
Yeah.
If you haven't noticed, Robert, Jim's quite witty like you.
Yeah. It also reminds me of Salvatore Castellano, who's one of the candidates that ran. I believe he ran against Setzler, if I'm not mistaken. I have to go back and confirm. But Setzler is the one here that was pushing the heartbeat bill so heavily. And
yeah.
What was the event that you guys were speaking at or at yesterday, you said?
Oh, we went to the Florida's Women's March, the Palm Beach County chapter. And that group of women, was about 30 of them, Jim? And, yeah. In fact, I'll share a photo with you guys on, our page, because we were there for 2 hours, and those women are very well organized. They delegate responsibilities. They're very in tune and in touch with every issue that's going on currently that face women's rights. They are rallying. They are part of marches. They're getting on buses. They're coordinating, going to Tallahassee. They are able to fundraise. They use their state chapter to help fundraise so that they can offset the expenses of the bus ride. But then there's 3 or 4 organizations that all share in those expenses. So we were able to speak to the women's group yesterday about Jim's story, but we were also able to speak about women's rights and the issues facing women, like the heartbeat bill. In Florida, it's parental consent right now for anyone under the age of 18. That's where they're going to hit us first in this state with Georgia's heartbeat bill that seems to have taken on national attention. Florida is expected to follow. And then I don't know if you saw, Robert, but in Texas, there's some radical House of Representatives that has been married 5 times that is proposing a bill that if a woman aborts a baby, that she can get the death penalty. It's in writing. It's a House bill in Texas. So, yeah. So the women were all speaking about these issues, and they were talking about the Amendment 4 here in Florida, where it's the restoration of felons' rights. In this state, the Floridians voted by 64%, I think it was, right?
Right.
64%. They approved Amendment 4 to restore felons' rights as long as they pay all of their fees. If they had, what else do they have to go through? Probation, all that.
They got to finish probation, parole, and pay all the fines and restitution. That's what that. Well, actually, the statute, not the statute, the constitutional amendment says complete your sentence, okay? But it doesn't define what that means. So the legislature is now trying to say, well, that really means you got to finish your sentence by all your probation or your parole, and you got to pay all your fines. And there's two categories of payment that a defendant usually is required to make. One of those payments is restitution to the victim, and the other payment is all your court costs and the costs of probation and supervision, things of that nature. Those two different separate categories of payments that the defendant has to make, and they're trying to make sure that these people these felons who've had their rights restored don't actually qualify to vote, because they want to essentially impose what is a poll tax by making them pay the money in order to qualify to vote.
So in Florida, this Amendment 4 overwhelmingly passes by 64%, and the Republicans all freak out. Governor DeSantis gets elected Republican governor, and they have now been using their legislative session, the Republicans, to make it as complicated as possible for any of the felons to restore their rights, because they're anticipating that the majority of the felons that restore their rights will be Democrats. And they are making it so complicated that they're saying anyone who committed murder or any kind of sexual assault can't restore their rights. They're also saying that when you go to register to vote, if you haven't completed restitution and all your fines and everything that you're required to spend, and you sign that you're eligible, then you can be prosecuted for that. So they're going to scare felons who are not sure if they met all the requirements, because we all know things show up months later after you think you've completed something. So now they're doing everything in our state to prevent those what the voters of Florida declared to be a right here for those felons to restore their rights. Now they're making it as complicated as possible to scare them away from restoring their rights.
Yeah, the voter suppression, it's so calculated.
It's just another method of voter suppression. As I said earlier and started this off, the more the people vote, the more they vote Democratic. And that's why Republicans want to prevent people from voting. And this is another one of their steps to prevent people from voting, is to make it as hard as possible for felons who completed their sentence. They want to make it impossible for them to vote.
Yeah.
The women also mentioned, which you and I...
Some of the women were very active in gathering the signatures and in that process of putting the amendment on the ballot for the referendum in the 2018 amendment. That's why many of them were also interested in the restoration of felon rights process through the legislature.
The women also spoke about registering voters, which we know that in Georgia, Stacey Abrams and her organization is taking the lead on that. Andrew Gillum in the Florida Democratic Party are taking that lead on here. I think Andrew Gillum's goal is 1 million new registered voters, and the Florida Democratic Party's goal is another 200,000 new registered voters. And I know the same thing is going on in Georgia, so the women are very involved in that. And the women are also involved in a topic you and I discussed last week, was the Medicare issue, and making sure that they want Medicare for all. So that's a whole different subject, but those were some of the issues that they brought up yesterday at our meeting, correct?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
they are one well-organized group of people. They're probably, most of them I would say were in their mid-30s, and they're typically moms. They have younger children, but they're very active. I was very impressed.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you've both seen the movie The Help, but there's a line in that movie that just comes to mind with all this calculated, voter suppression and all this strategy that goes into this. Aren't you tired, Miss Hilly? I mean, the effort.
The movie, The Help.
Yeah, I mean the effort that just goes into this. That it seems like you have to go on defense or offense all the time just to keep up with all of this. Again, I can't be tired just doing that. It just boggles my mind.
This legislature is reviving the requirement that supervisors of elections compare the voting rolls to, I think they're going to use the DMV list again, to make sure that quote-unquote, illegal aliens or non-U.S. citizens are not on the voting rolls and are purged. I think the last time they tried that, they found what they claimed to be a few 100,000 people's names didn't match from the voting rolls to the DMV. But eventually they found so many mistakes. Many of the supervisor elections, especially in the larger populated counties, are Democrats, and they actually established through a process that there were only, when they started out, in six figures, there were 87 people who actually were on the voter rolls who may or may not have been eligible to vote. They just couldn't confirm one way or the other. Everybody else was eligible to vote, or they had died. I have yet to see a dead person cast a ballot here in Palm Beach County. They'd have to pay an awful lot in postage for that vote by mail.
Well, physically, I mean, someone, voting for them, that's a whole nother, story there too. But,
well, you still have to produce a valid ID. There are a number of valid IDs, usually here in Florida, it's a driver's license. And you have to match a photo and a signature to the person that's actually voting. So it's that type of voter impersonation fraud is so rare throughout the United States. What is not rare is what's happened in North Carolina, which is the harvesting of votes and completing the harvested votes for the partisan for whom you're working, or harvesting votes and looking at the ballot and seeing if it's voting for the opposition and trashing those votes. That's essentially what happened in North Carolina to the Republicans up there, and they required a new election, if I recall. So the ones who are actually actively soliciting illegal votes, the evidence shows it's Republicans and not Democrats.
Yeah, that they have to just act the fool, as I'll call it, in order to just get their way. It is mind-boggling. So going back to
Republicans can't win fair and square elections. That's the bottom line. And they didn't even win the presidential election. Trump lost by 3 million votes. The only way he won is by the old electoral college system. Yeah. But he still lost the popular vote by 3 million. Republicans have he lost the popular vote by 3 million, and Bush lost the popular vote by what?
I don't remember.
Couple 100,000.
Bush election.
Yeah. So I think the last 2 or 3 Republican presidents did not win the popular vote. Their policies don't get winning votes.
Yeah.
Their policies lose. That's why they have to cheat.
You like that, Robert?
Yeah, I mean it's again just mind-boggling. I've even had a coworker from Asia that we talked about, the Trump election, and he says, so let me get this right. He didn't get all the votes that he needed, but yet he still won. And I said, welcome to America. Yeah.
That's our electoral system.
So today we went to a Democratic meeting for women, and Jim won a anti-Trump basket.
Yes.
And I will share photos with you, Robert, because I know that you're going to appreciate this. But one of them are impeachment. Mm-hmm. It's a box of mints. The other one was some toilet paper with Trump on it. It's a gift basket for if you're anti-Trump. So I will take some photographs. It was quite the comical scene at the Democratic event today. And I'll take some pictures and share it with you, and you can share it with everybody. So I think you'll find it a little humorous.
Yeah, there was one of my friends here locally in Atlanta that joined our calendar project, and he actually has Trump toilet paper in his photo, yeah. So
Jim, Indivisible, Georgia 11 is, you're familiar with the Indivisible groups here in Palm Beach County, but Indivisible in Georgia seems to be more organized. Each of their districts, which is divided up by their congressional seats pretty much, they all have their own organization, plus they have the state organization, and then Robert is very in tune with the national organization. And the state of Georgia has an Indivisible group that's not Democrat or Republican, it's progressive though, and they're very organized, and I am extremely impressed at this particular Indivisible group because they are very active. They all want to help. Very diverse group trying to reach out to all the needs in Georgia, and they're by far more active than the ones here in Florida, or at least locally in Palm Beach County. But Robert just coordinated a fundraiser where they raise funds for their club, and could be an advertisement or something that's going to help out in the upcoming 2020 election. Could be a billboard, could be a direct mail piece. And they raised $500, and the national match them $500 for their organization. So it's this grassroots effort. There's folks within the Indivisible that just want to do the rallies. There's other folks that want to do canvassing. There's other folks like Robert who put the issues out there. He's current every day. Trust me, I think sometimes 5, 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, Robert sends me issues like you do. And and so, yeah, it's a really unique group of people on the north side of Atlanta. And they're going to be, when we get done with what their leadership council is about to implement, they're going to be well organized to influence the 2020 election and flip seats in that area from red to blue. And they're going after what their club is named after, Georgia 11, their congressional congressman, Barry Loudermilk, who Robert is not a fan of, and I followed his lead on it, but Michelle is no longer a fan either on a personal level now, because he sent out a very arrogant email that was anti-abortion too, but he was very condescending, I think was the word I came up with.
Yeah, I mean...
So now you just made an enemy of a political consultant.
Yeah, I mean, Barry, the links, and I've actually never seen him go through what he is doing now. I mean, there is a weekly email newsletter that never used to happen before. He's hired someone to do his social media. I've met Barry once, and he doesn't strike me as a very technical person. And so someone is doing his social media, and the images and all that kind of stuff going on there. But he has not held a town hall. The last one that he held, it was a telephone town hall, which I guess they may argue this is what we're doing right here as well. But Barry, you're also our so-called elected official. You need to come out and address all of your constituents, not the ones that just want to vote for you.
So at our meeting today, we also had Congresswoman Lois Frankel, who's a Democrat here in Palm Beach County, and she came to the meeting to speak. And she conducted her own town hall meeting this morning, which she asked for us to forgive her because she was a little snarky today, because she said she had a lot of Fox News watchers at her town hall meeting. So she got quite a little chuckle with that one. But she's conducting town hall meetings here with her constituency, and she's somebody that you will see frequent downtown. We have a downtown area in West Palm Beach called Clematis, where there's restaurants, cafes, there's a theater down there, library, etc. And she will walk up and down the streets and shake hands and reach out to her constituency. So, yes, when you serve all the people in your district, whether they voted for you or not. So I think Congressman Loudermilk owes you a town hall meeting.
Yeah. We'll keep asking.
I think that you'll find that Republicans are afraid to attend town hall meetings because they're afraid to provide answers to the questions they get, like, why do you vote against the equal rights for women? Why do you vote against equal pay? Why did you vote against providing health care for people? Why do you vote against civil rights for people? They don't want to answer those questions, so they avoid town halls. The bottom line is that it's a Democratic Party that is in favor of equal rights for people. It's in favor of equal pay for equal work. It's in favor of women's right to choose. It's in favor of providing health care for everybody. And we're not afraid to have those town hall meetings because we are very proud to answer those questions, that we want to see equal justice and provide health care so people can survive in today's world. And they don't have to work 2 and 3 and 4 jobs in order to make ends meet.
Yeah, and speaking of that, one of my favorite restaurants here in the metro area, Sonny's Barbecue, I think they have some locations maybe at least down to Central Florida. I'm not sure if it's all the way down to
They have them down here, they have them all the way down.
So tomorrow for tax
I
day.
like Sonny's Barbecue.
So tomorrow for tax
What did you
day.
say?
Sorry?
Oh, yeah, tomorrow's tax day, too, yeah.
Yeah, but no one's getting a refund. So what is Sonny's Barbecue doing?
They're giving half-price rib platters tomorrow, which is a whole lot more than the Republicans have given us.
They're going to charge you $10.40 for the 1040 form.
The tax form, yeah. So the Indivisible Georgia 11 did. We had some billboards recently, Jim, in their area within that district, and we put up billboards 3 months ago, Robert?
Yep.
Warning everybody that they weren't going to get a hefty tax refund, and we were asking everybody, "How is your refund?" And I think most people during this tax season are quite surprised that they actually owed money, that they weren't getting a refund.
Yep.
So how are the Republican tax cuts working out for the middle class?
Not very well. I cannot find anybody that was really well. I think there were maybe one or two folks that something about being able to deduct other dependents in the home or something like that. I forget exactly what the angle was, but I was hard pressed to find anyone who was happy with and as you said, a lot of people are having to pay. I mean, we had to pay. Now, some of that, yes, I was was going to foresee, but we had to pay in the thousands of dollars this year. And if we go back, I mean, I don't have it sitting right in front of me, but I recall the Republicans, when they did this tax bill, they said you were going to get more money in your paycheck. Well, when everybody went and looked at the end of the year, I mean, let me also recall back then as well, they did not say you had to go back and change your withholding. I think hopefully y'all are agreeing here with me. But yet now, all these people are either not getting a refund, a very minimal refund, or, they're having to pay. How many businesses out there rely on tax refund season as an economic incentive to go out and spend that money? And now that's been taken away as well. I really, truly hope that people really sit down and look at what has been done. You also see news story after news story of corporations who are able to write off everything under the sun and bring their tax down to zero. It again, is mind-boggling, what is going on.
Yeah, my son has to go. He's very angry. He sent me a text this morning that he had to pick up extra shifts at work this week because he has to go and give the government $270 for the first time ever in his adult life.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can hear it, but the weather that you promised you were going to send us from
Has
Georgia
arrived.
has arrived. It's pouring outside.
Yeah, stay safe there. Let's see. So the other things I had in my notes here, specifically about fundraising, which we did talk about there, but it's been also very interesting. We've had some campaigns here in Indivisible 11 is to go after these corporate donors. Publix, which I believe is also a corporation, goes all the way down to South Florida. They had contributed to Barry Loudermilk's campaign in the past. And I recall having a conversation with the gentleman, I think he was, is it Lake? I forget exactly where, Lakeland, I think is where their headquarters is. And he and I...
Yes, Lakeland, Florida.
Yeah. So he and I had a conversation, calling out that, again, Barry should be doing his job, and he's not. And, they responded back to us and said, we have no more money for Barry Loudermilk. If you truly keep on these corporations and keep telling these stories over and over again of, I'm sorry, I understand that a corporation is there to make money, but there has to be at the end of the day a right or wrong. And it's been very interesting to see, some of the, if you go back and look at FEC, I mean, even there were requests. What was the lady in Mississippi? She wanted folks wanted to get their contributions back from her, and she refused to. I mean, okay. I mean, this is just insanity. That just because you're an elected official, you have this this machine, as I'll call it, going out there and soliciting donations from these corporations that aren't paying any taxes in a lot of cases, but yet they're getting all this influence.
Okay, what?
Oh, he was just talking about corporations being able to contribute to congressional seats in this case, as an example, Publix being one of them.
Well, one of the things that I would like to see is to curtail more the right of corporations to contribute to campaigns. I know we have the Supreme Court case that says corporations are people and it infringes on their free speech. But I think there are ways around that such that we can prevent corporations from essentially buying the elections. I don't know I don't know what the campaign reports are in Georgia, but in Florida, the Republican Party, because the Republicans are in control here, reported that they collected $5.1 or $5.2 million last quarter. The Democratic Party, which is out of power, only collected $800,000, and it's all corporate lobbying money going to the Republican Party because the Republicans control the legislature and they control the governor's house. So until you get some sort of reform that controls the amount of contributions, that's going to be an unfortunate consequence we have to deal with for the next foreseeable future.
Yep.
Which just means we have to focus on grassroots campaign. If we can't keep up with the Republican fundraising, then we have to out-labor them on the ground with a good canvassing strategy, as well as getting the voters to register, which is a little more complicated in Georgia, but I still think we can do it, is switching some of those independents and the MPAs over to Democrats. I think more, as this president spouts off more hate, we're seeing those people who declared themselves independents move to the Democratic Party. We're seeing the youth in our college campuses move towards the Democratic Party, so there needs to be that initiative among young Democrats to get them registered as Democrats, and or to vote, in your case, to declare themselves at the primary as a Democrat. So there's a lot of strategies that's going to require us to work on the ground, because they can outspend us by commercials, direct mail pieces, etc. So, everyone's using text messaging and digital marketing, but the ground game, I've always said my entire 22 years of being involved in political campaigns is a hand in a hand is a guaranteed vote. Mm-hmm. So voters like it when we knock on their doors. Yep.
Yeah, and our group members, there's an older lady in our group. I felt bad that I was not able to actually go out and support, the folks that were knocking on those doors leading up to our last election. I do what I can, but yeah, the ground game was tremendous. And using the tools at hand that we still have access to organize those ground events.
Well, I don't really want to speak on here all of our tools, because I don't think that's the most appropriate place, but I think it's wise that the members of the Indivisible group know that the leadership, and we are all working on having those tools so that they accurately knock on the correct door, or they accurately phone bank the correct people that we want for our issues and for our party. So I applaud the leadership group for making sure that those tools are going to be in place in the very near future, so that we all can get the training and that we will be lethal, I think is the word I used, going into the 2020 election.
Yep. And so you remember Representative Cooper, that is my state representative here in Georgia.
Susan Cooper, yes.
I remember seeing a campaign door knocker on my neighbor's door, but not on my door. So it's very clear that my home is very blue.
Yeah, I remember when I first met you, Robert, I wasn't concerned about which house was yours. I saw the Indivisible Georgia 11 sticker as clear as day. Jim and I have to wrap up here only because, and I apologize for being slightly delayed. I started today off with a flat tire.
Yeah.
So it put me a little bit behind, but I really appreciate you having Jim participate on this. I just think some of what he went through in the 2018 election, he is an attorney. He reads legislation all the time. And, he has some insight that's completely different than most of us because he lived it. I mean, imagine coming within 32 votes of winning a seat, and we made national news. I mean, it was on Fox News, it was on CNN. We had the Washington Post, the New York Times. Everybody was coming down interviewing us.
Yeah.
You were a star for a day, Jeff.
So have you made a decision
like
on the next?
Paparazzi.
Yeah, have you made a decision on the next race yet?
We're looking very carefully at the next race. I'll make a decision by June. I'll need to start. If I decide to do it, I'll need to start raising funds well in advance. The incumbent has already started. He's got about a $6,000 or $7,000 head start at this point in time. Fortunately, he cannot raise funds during the legislative session, so he can't raise money for his reelection during March or April. So that's about the only head start he will have if I jump in June. And I'll try to match him dollar for dollar, which was very hard to do. But we're looking very close. And like I said, we did a lot of things right since we came within 32 votes. And it's an off year. So I'm thinking, if we have a good presidential candidate on the Democratic side and a good turnout in Florida, we'll have significantly more Democratic voters out than come out in a non-presidential year. So it should be a winnable race for either me or whoever Democrat decides to run in that race.
And also his opponent will now have a voting record. And with all the radical bills that the Republicans have pushed through the House, he's going to have a voting record on those radical views. So we will be able to, our messaging and will be very clear and direct, and he's going to feel it. So the state of Florida has made District 89 a priority going into 2020, and we've also had some national organizations making sure 89 is a priority. Just like the state of Georgia is one of those 7 states that's a priority in the in national organizations because it's going to be a decision maker in 2020. Trump is either going to have a problem in Palm Beach County, Florida, I said it, or he's going to have a problem up in Georgia, but he's going to have a problem in one of our states. So let's hope it's both.
Yeah, agreed. Well, yeah. So stay dry and get the tire fixed. But thanks for joining. And any other parting words before we wrap this up?
Just want to say thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to reach out to you and the people who listen to the podcast. Thank you.
Yeah.
And thanks, Robert. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah. Well, have a good weekend. Like I said, stay dry. Well, I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Robert.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.